Hello everyone, welcome back to the Dominion Herald, formerly known as the Esoteric Opinion. This channel has gone through a rebrand in order to strengthen its image as well as bring a sort of legitimacy to its name so that we can take our news, our opinion, and our analysis to the next level. I hope you enjoy the videos that are to come, and I hope that this content will be of some benefit to you. Thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe and support this content. So today's video, we're going to dive into an interesting piece that I found on the National Post about Erin O'Toole's perspective on domestic politics in Canada, as well as his viewpoint of Justin Trudeau. Mr. O'Toole uses a statement, a very profound statement. Well, some might think it's kind of quirky, but he says that we need to make Canada serious again. And he says this as a sharp critique of the Trudeau government's leadership and particularly its handling of trade, defense, and foreign policy. O'Toole argues that Canada has lost its credibility and influence on the global stage while under Trudeau, and he proposes a return to pragmatism and clear, actionable policies. In analyzing O'Toole's vision, we can break down his key points and evaluate the feasibility and implications of his proposals. To dive into first things first, O'Toole touches on the topic of trade and political points. And we know that, on a side note here, that Justin Trudeau loves to score political points. He loves to take hits at other politicians. So let's see what O'Toole has to say about that. In the Post, O'Toole wrote, or said, that O'Toole's criticism of Trudeau and his trade and his foreign policy highlights a crucial issue: the government's tendency to use trade deals as political tools. By emphasizing progressive values in trade negotiations, such as environmental policies and human rights, Trudeau's team has often mixed domestic politics with international affairs. O'Toole notes, "Anytime I was somewhat critical of the strategy undertaken by Ms. Freeland and Justin Trudeau, I was told, 'Your Team Canada, you are being disloyal.'" O'Toole's position is clear. Canada needs a more pragmatic approach to trade, one that puts national interests ahead of domestic political games. He points to the U.S. as an example, warning that Canada risks being pushed into unfavorable trade positions if it does not realign its policies with its biggest ally. O'Toole says, if Canada and the EU didn't come into line on EV policies, on steel and aluminum emissions, and trade issues, if we weren't aligned on security issues right from Hawaii, which is the phone company in China, to the South China Sea and Taiwan, then increasingly we were going to kind of be cajoled into line through the use of trade restrictions or tariffs. O'Toole brings up the argument and critique that trade deals shouldn't be about domestic virtue signaling. They need to be grounded in clear strategic interests that benefit Canada in a globalized economy. Next, O'Toole dives into further into the virtue signaling and how Trudeau's government is more about symbolism rather than substance. O'Toole's critique of virtue signaling in politics is a well-established point. He argues that Trudeau's government has prioritized symbolism over substance, often focusing on progressive gestures rather than pragmatic solutions to real-world issues. A prime example comes from O'Toole's own experience as former leader of the Conservative Party and having to deal with Justin Trudeau as as former opposition leader. At one point, so O'Toole says, at one point I debated Catherine McKenna, former Minister of the Environment, on their progressive agenda, and I called it virtue signaling. Gerald Butts, Trudeau's principal secretary at the time, accused me of using an alt-right word until I showed him he had used a term that was similar, which was virtue signaling. So this is an important point. O'Toole's call for a shift away from symbolic politics is about ensuring that Canadians' policies and Canada's policies are effective, not just performative. Rather than focusing on political branding and scoring points, Canada needs to focus on policies that address pressing national issues like trade and defense. Now moving on, O'Toole then wanted to underscore the point of restoring Canada's global credibility. O'Toole's central arguments, the main one being is that Canada has lost its credibility on the global stage, particularly with powerful nations like the US, which will be under the Trump administration very soon. O'Toole asserts that Canada must reassert itself as a reliable global player. He argues and says, the Prime Minister, with his socks and Care Bear economics, used his brand to great effect in his earlier days. O'Toole concedes, and he beat me in 2021, he grins. But this is all catching up, O'Toole asserts. O'Toole's assessment of Canada's current global standing is sharp. Under Trudeau's Canada has been seen as a nice country with good intentions, but without the muscle to back it up or the substance to provide commitment or responsibility where it counts. Meaning that Canada does not fulfill its promises and does not show up when needed when it comes to foreign diplomacy. That's why countries like the US and others have seen Canada as being unreliable. O'Toole's proposal is that we need to inject more substance into Canada's foreign policy, particularly in defense and security. The time for signaling is over. The time for action is now, he says. He wants to then say that Canada needs to focus on its military spending and reaching the target that NATO had set for Canada and other NATO nations, which was 2%. O'Toole wanted to center his arguments basically on a couple points related to defense, one of which being Arctic sovereignty. As the world increasingly turns its attention to the Arctic due to climate change and resource competition, O'Toole argues that Canada needs to assert its control over the region. O'Toole says we should be making a strong impression by saying we're going to own the North, Canada's North. The Northwest Passage is Canadian, and we're going to have a presence there to make sure that Mr. O'Toole calls for a stronger military presence in the region and is not only talking about asserting its sovereignty of Canada's sovereignty over that region, but ensuring that Canada plays a strategic role in the planning of its partners and allies and seen as important in that position. He also suggests that Canada needs to do more on energy, and he says that we need to ensure that energy security is a top priority of Canada. He supports financing the Keystone XL pipeline, an issue that has been highly controversial. especially given the cancellation by the United States on multiple occasions. O'Toole says, one, there's political symbolism to it. It was canceled by Obama under Trump. It was reversed by Trump, and then it was canceled by Biden on his first day in office. And, if I might note, on my own accord here, that O'Toole has a very good point here, because under Mr. Stephen Harper, Obama was ready to go ahead with Keystone XL, and then right when Trudeau got in, he could sense that Mr. Trudeau is not a strong leader, and he can score his own points here. He can cancel the Keystone XL project and ensure that he gets into good favors with the climate groups, and he knows Trudeau won't push back on it because Trudeau is in a tight corner. Trudeau didn't know how to play that game well. He doesn't know politics well. He just knows how to shoot and shit on other politicians. Sorry for my language. So, in the end, what Trudeau is saying here is that instead of just focusing on, hitting each other in the back with knives and, trying to stab the other opponent, we should be focusing on making real policy and real decision and real action. Trudeau has been lacking that. Trudeau has not offered that to Canadians. Trudeau is always about preservation of his self-image, never about what is the actual substance to his work. It has been seen in many, many, many memoirs and many, interviews from former Liberals, such as the former finance minister, I think his name was Patrick Maroon, something like that. I'm sorry if I got the name wrong, but even he said it himself, that Trudeau never was a policy type of guy. He let his advisors handle the policies, while he just sat on the back end and cared about how the image was. Now it's time for us as Canadians, I'd say, to move on from Trudeau. We've had enough fun with this little drama teacher, and now it's time for us to get real and have solid policy. Thank you very much for watching the first edition of the Dominion Herald, and I hope you enjoyed this content. There is much more to come. We're going to be taking a much more serious tone on this channel, while being critical and while being objective to the best we can. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please consider subscribing, sharing, and liking this content if you enjoyed. Thank you.